Greetings, Pi Theta sisters. I am Susan Hitting Maher. I am part of the graduating class of Carthage College, 1967. I'm also one of the founders of Pi Theta sorority. It's very difficult to believe that it's been 55 years since the beginning of our sorority and the beginning of many changes in this school and also in our country. It's also very hard to understand how we've all lived through what we have, but I have been now asked to speak about why sororities started, how they started, why Pi Theta, and the difficult road that we had to travel in order to succeed and have Pi Theta succeed. Decisions that we had to make, both personal and decisions that would have an incredible impact on the future and the success for Pi Theta. I spent my first year at Carthage, Illinois. It was then called the Old Campus. Obviously, it was called the Old Campus because it was old. Carthage was founded in 1870. It approximately had 600 to 700 students. It was beautiful, but it was quite old. It was called the Old Campus, but there was also a second campus. It was new. It was Carthage College campus that was established in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The 60s at that time was a very, very turbulent time. It was for the whole country. President John Kennedy had been assassinated. The civil rights movement was actively moving forward with Martin Luther King. The Vietnam War, the whole situation was heating up. The NOW, or National Organization of Women, was letting everybody know about the needs for women's equal rights through demonstrations and sit-ins. But change was coming everywhere, and that included the small farming community of Carthage, Illinois. And again, it was a small college, and it was a new college in about 300 miles away. There are big differences. They were quite significant between the two campuses. Carthage in Kenosha was founded in 1962. Beautiful lakeside location. It was situated between Milwaukee and Chicago. It was a very small enrollment. It was co-ed, and it was called the new campus as opposed to the old campus. But the differences were very different. The new campus, of course, is in Kenosha. It was not accredited. It was not an accredited college. There were no sports, plays, music. There were no fine arts, and there was no Greek life. The old campus, however, was different. It was fully accredited. It had active sports program, fine arts, music, plays, and it had a Greek life. In that case, it was Greek fraternities. There were 3 at the time on the old campus. Beta Phi Epsilon were the squires. Tau Sigma Chi, turtles. Delta Omega Nu were the dons. But sororities did not exist. Campus life for women on the old campus in particular was not very appealing. Sororities were not allowed. Fraternities, of course they were allowed. Women had dorm hours, 11 p.m. on weekdays, 1 a.m. on the weekends. But there were no hours for men. Women had to sign in and out of the dorms. Men did not. There were no athletic programs for women. Men had intercollegiate athletic programs and intramurals. Most of the student enrollment came from Milwaukee and Chicago. But due to Carthage, Illinois' location, it was very difficult to go home to visit. It wasn't viable at all. Distance too far, travel arrangements difficult. You had to work around your dorm hours and your check-in and your check-out. And it ended up fraternity parties were really the only social activity on the campus. So all of this, as you can well imagine, was a big problem for women. Common dating courtesies were ignored. Some girls were made to feel that they should be grateful they were even invited to a social event, even if it was at the last minute. Dissatisfaction in the social climate was talked about often, and even with the administration. In the spring of 1964, the old campus was sold to Robert Morris College. Change was not well received by either campus. The faculty was rather nervous. They were concerned about their jobs. They were concerned about moving their families to a new location in Kenosha. The alumni was upset. They just wanted the campus to stay in Illinois. They wanted everyone to experience where all those wonderful memories had been made for them. So with this new change that was facing everyone at the Carthage, Illinois campus, the women thought that maybe, just maybe, there would be a chance with all the new changes, maybe we could have sororities. We did address all of this to the administration, but we were told no. In retrospect, the move from Carthage to Kenosha and the merging of the two campuses was, by far, the best possible decision for Carthage College, with thanks to Dr. Harold Lentz, whose perseverance and vision saw it all through. So we all packed up our suitcases, our traditions, our memories, Kissing Rock, and moved to Kenosha. So a little bit more about some of the things that were going on around us in 1964. It was very difficult for many women to start a business without her husband's permission. Banks could refuse credit cards to unmarried women. And if she was married, her husband needed to co-sign for her. Many states would not allow women to serve on juries. Their place, you see, was in the home. But change was coming. As Deepak Chopra said, all great changes are preceded by chaos. So the old campus and the new campus now were merging together. A lot of adjustments and change. So many things were different. The dorm rooms were different. Possibly a new roommate. Meeting new people. The weather was not as mild. It was windy, really cold, lots of snowstorms. The lake was noisy. The wind whistled through your windows. The long walk to class on a blustery bluff was difficult at times. They put up lifelines that you could hold on to as you walked across the top. The faculty was different, and in some cases, new department heads. Everyone was trying very hard to adjust to all these changes. The physical look of the campus in Kenosha was difficult. There was no grass. It was just mud. It was a few trees. Whatever happened to the beautiful evergreens on Evergreen Walk back on the old campus? Some buildings were not even completed. Shuttle buses took us back and forth to town for some classes. The women's dorm wasn't finished, so a number of the girls had to live on the psychiatric floor at St. Catherine's Hospital in town. There were no field houses, chapel, no athletic fields. We had to go to the local high school and use their facilities there. There were no wastebasket. It was a forgotten thing. Plumbing didn't work in some of the dorms, and some of the buildings were flooded because of storms. Fall and winter in 1964 was very difficult. And again, there was very little social life. And because the school was now between Chicago and Milwaukee, students could go home much easier. And they did on the weekends. And Carthage became a suitcase college. The three established fraternity from the old campus decided to go forward that year with a fall rush. Opportunity to increase their membership with men from the new campus and the incoming freshmen was of importance for them. However, two groups from the new campus in Kenosha decided to start their own fraternities. Tau Sigma Phi, or the Tau Sigs, Tau Delta Nu, the Buffaloes. Now there were 5 fraternities. Women still had hours, they still had to check in and out, and there were no sororities. So it's now 1965. The Vietnam War is continuing to escalate with regular bombings. Demonstrations are turning into riots nationwide. For all men on campus, life was changing. They had to face the possibility of becoming 1A and being drafted into military service. So this was a huge concern. But again, a voice, this time from Victor Hugo. Stronger than armies is the power of the right idea whose time has come. And on February 22nd, 1965, the time had come for change. Nancy Johnson was a sophomore at Carthage. She had an appointment with the Dean of Women, Christine Hogan. Very ironically, Dean Hogan was a national officer of the sorority Chi Omega. There were several women in the reception area for Dean Hogan's office, all of them seeking time to talk with her for different things that were going on. Usually it was problems in the dorms. And so there were so many people in the office at that time that there was a lot of conversation going on. Quite often, Dean Hogan's door was not closed because people were going in and out of that very quickly. So you could hear things very well in her office if you cared to do that. Nancy had finished her conversation with Dean Hogan, and she just decided to throw out that sorority question and put it on the table one more time. Why can't Carthage have sororities? To her shock, Dean Hogan replied, I have been waiting for someone to ask me because you can. Well, Nancy was astounded. She thought she would have to be there and argue and battle over this whole thing. But she realized that was not necessary at all. This was the green light to go ahead. So Nancy quickly walked back through the receiving area, and one of the things she noticed right away, that all the women that had been there before were now gone. They had all started running back to the dorms to spread the news, the good news, that sororities could start. It was pandemonium back in the women's dorms. Keep in mind, no cell phones, no email, no texting, no Twitter, no FaceTime, but running personally up and down through the dorms, up and down the stairs. The excitement actually was electric. Nancy came to my room in Denhart. She told me the great news. We were so excited, but we knew we had to very quickly to get started on finding women who could join us and could take us to the final goal of being approved. Fortunately, Nancy had a complete list of all the women on campus, and that was because she had chaired the Queen's balloting for homecoming that year, and she had a complete list. So we discussed what would be important, what what kind of person, what attributes would this person have that could be helpful to us to get this whole sorority started successfully. So we came across 4 or 5 things that we thought would be most important. She had to be an independent thinker. She had to be smart. She had to be hardworking. She had to be organized, and she had to be responsible. So we made a list of potential members and agreed that the group should be fairly small and manageable. We wrote notes to each of these people, explained that sororities could now start, and would you care to join us? We put the notes in an envelope, and we put the envelope under their door. The one request we had was, could you please reply by tomorrow a.m. Tomorrow a.m. arrived. There were 28 acceptances. So we felt we needed to try to get as organized as possible, and by doing that, we went ahead and we did elect an executive board to see us through the beginning of all of this. And we felt we were totally on our way. The very next day, February 23rd, we had to have another executive board election. 2 officers' boyfriends did not feel that the girls should be devoting so much time to a, quote, soon to fail, unquote, women's organization. So the girls resigned. Our members at that point were about 25. Within 1 day, the number of sororities became 5. The administration informed us that all sororities, all of us, had to have a written constitution and bylaws ratified by May 20th, or if you don't, your constitution will not meet their approval and their sorority would not be recognized. February 24th, 27th, our membership stayed at 25. Other sororities continued to grow their membership in very large numbers. We tried to stay focused on keeping a more manageable and lower number. We wanted to be sure that we could attain the approval of the administration and get our constitution and everything in line, feeling that too large of a group may be too difficult to handle. We did know how important the Constitution and the bylaws were. So we asked Nancy Curtis, who was a senior at that time and would be graduating in a few months in June of 1965. We asked her if she would be willing to help us with this Constitution and the bylaws. Nancy saw this as a great opportunity. She felt she wanted, before she left, she wanted to contribute, something meaningful for women. And that's what she did. So at that point, we knew it was in good hands. So we then continued on with having our rather frequent meetings. So the next meeting was, we need a name. Bring suggestions. It ended up with long debates with Beta Kappa Chi as the winner. So what did we do? We ordered sweatshirts. So more changes were popping up, some which we had not expected. There were members that were expressing that they were receiving pressure from different directions. And it was not just boyfriends, but it was also friendships and roommate relationships that people felt were being threatened. And quite often they were threatened because sororities now offered a choice, and not everybody picked the same sorority. And so at times, it really was very difficult for some. We were all very, very busy. There were so many things to do, and we had just a short time. We had a constitution and bylaws, name, colors, pins, Panhellenic, officers, committees, dues, advisors, rush, pledging manuals, and pledges. It was stressful but exciting. And sometimes you found you were working with people that you maybe never would have had the chance to have known them if it hadn't been for the sorority. And it was a wonderful experience to meet people that was very unexpected. At the same time, nationwide, colleges and universities, men were burning their draft cards. They were leaving for Canada. Demonstrations continued on campuses and cities, and some became very, very violent. Bloody Sunday, 2,000 state troopers clashed with 535 civil rights demonstrators in Selma, Alabama, and it was, quote, Bloody Sunday. On February 28th, we ventured out and we had an invitational tea for prospective advisors. Pat Burnett was a professor here of English, and she was a great choice for us. She encouraged us to change things and look at things differently, not to be influenced by what had been done before by other sorority or fraternal groups, but she also kept us focused. And sadly, at the same time, 2 more executive board members did resign due to boyfriend problems. March 1st, it was very different. Now we didn't notice all that mud and wind and weather so much. We had lots to do, and we were loving it. And we finally met and had our final executive board selected. The president was Nancy Johnson, vice president Susan Hitting, secretary Joyce Rhodes, treasurer Diana Great. But we also received news that one of the sororities had to disband, so now there were just 4 groups. It never occurred to us to disband. Everyone had responsibilities. Everybody helped one another. And we had a purpose. We also began to see encouragement and support from fraternities and the faculty. Example, Beta Phi Epsilon and John Shumway, who was the officer with Beta Phi Epsilon, offered to help Nancy Curtis with that daunting task of writing a constitution and all the bylaws. And we will always be so grateful for that collaboration. March 8th, we went through a very rough first draft Constitution reading. It was long and tedious. But along with the discussion was the dissatisfaction with the Beta Kappa Chi name. We ended up canceling the sweatshirt order with Beta Kappa Chi on it, and we had more and more discussion for a new name, and we came up with a new one, Lambda Chi, and we ordered new sweatshirts. On March 23rd, we were unhappy with Lambda Chi, and we had another emergency meeting. This time we went at it a little differently. We all decided we did want something different. We wanted something different from the other groups. We wanted a new look. We wanted to distinguish ourselves from others. So Pi Theta came up. And Pi Theta was the answer. And it just felt right. Unfortunately, we were unable to cancel the Lambda Chi sweatshirt order, but we were able to order new Pi Theta sweatshirts in a few weeks. So, change. We're seeing more and more male students leaving school, either being drafted or enlisting. There were now boots on the ground in Vietnam. Martin Luther King and 25,000 activists successfully ended the second march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. So we had, on March 28th, an installation of the executive board. We were also notified that all charter members must be finalized and their names submitted before May 20th. But we had a really nice change, a very welcoming change come along on April 8th. We started a tradition of eating together once a week. We enjoyed working on and designing the pin that we hoped we'd all be wearing soon. We participated in Greek Week, and sadly, a second sorority disbanded, so now there were just 3 sororities left. On April 15th, our Constitution and bylaws were submitted to the administration. Pi Theta was the only one that was not sent back for revisions. It was the only one. Spring break came, and we had reps that took a couple days out of their spring break, and we all met to work on the Pan-Hellenic Council, rules and regulations, constitutions and bylaws. April 30th, we had a retreat at Pat Burnett's house, and Pat Burnett was our advisor. We worked on an agenda and goals for next year. The concept of that whole thought was so wonderful because it was a future. We were moving toward a future, and we were planning now for next year. We worked on a basic plan for Rush, we worked on concepts, and we worked on ideas for a pledge period. On May 1st, we submitted the names of charter members. There were 18 active, 6 alumni, 1 advisor, and 1 honorary advisor, and that was Mrs. Matthews. On May 20th, Pi Theta Constitution was ratified by the administration, and we were now approved. On May 25th, we officially ratified our Constitution and bylaws, but we also took the time to think about what it was we had learned and basically had learned about ourselves. And I think the general feeling was many of us, we developed leadership skills. We experienced pride, loyalty, and confidence. Pi Theta turned out to be a sorority that had enriched all of our lives. And it is wonderful to know that this has continued for 50+ years. I know Pi Theta changed my life. My hope is that the Pi Theta experience will also enrich your life. Thank you.